And we are back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan and Pelly. The order's getting messed up with the names there, but we're trying to get Jamarl on. I teased on the other side of the break.
Jamarl, if you're listening,
we're here. Come towards our voice. No, but they're just tech glitches. And here's the thing. He is in Geneva. This is a big event. He talked about how they were stopped at the Swiss border, and admittedly, maybe that just happens normally, but also this is a big event they're going into. A lot of people, a lot of press, and I'm sure some technical connectivity issues. Although I hear that we have him now. Jamarl, are you on with us?
What's up? I am here with you. I
feel the embodied presence of your voice.
Technological means.
Yes, and soul or something.
Do you?
Jamarl, thank you for joining us. How are you doing? Where are you, and what's going on?
So I am in Geneva, Switzerland. We're at the event. Apparently Putin is here, and he is at the event at the villa. Joe Biden is en route. In the press center, they're showing video of the motorcade, and Biden is, of course, rolling deep. They're at a villa on the water, and apparently there were even like military exercises doing like going on boats just in case somebody tried to intercept on water. So there are thousands of police and military and guard here, basically all over Geneva. And at this point, we're just waiting for them to go into the meeting. They've shaken hands with the Swiss president, or at the very least, I think Putin did. And that's where we are. And so we're at the press center. It's not swarming with press yet, but there's press all over the place, and they're broken up into like print and broken up into radio and et cetera. So at this point, we're waiting.
That makes perfect sense. That's actually a pretty vivid description in a lot of ways that you just gave there. I haven't covered any of these.
It's exciting, man.
These kinds of things before. That's kind of what I get to. It's like the feel of it. Like there's a lot of stuff going on, and this is a high-profile meeting, and it's like a genuine event of international significance on a years or decades scale. In other words, this is a big thing that's happening, and not just for today or this week or this month, but for history in some sense. And it's the presidents and the thing. It's not just pageantry. They're receiving the protection due to world leaders coming in for these massive talks, and you're there, and the press is there, sort of spectating. You don't know exactly when this thing is started or what's going to happen with it. It's weird. I can only imagine it. What does it feel like for you there, Jamarl?
So I am on a 12 right now, and you know me, right? Like we've interacted, and you see me pretty much high on caffeine, like when I'm revving everything, or really excited when talking about aliens. Let's say if the alien thing is like 12, I'm at like a 13 right now. I'm at like a 13 and 14. Mindia, however, is on a 2, which makes it very weird. He was like, just stop it. I was like, but what if they do this? What happens to this? What if this?
What I want to know is how is Mindia and his brother like twins, or is his brother like the opposite? He's like always excited.
No, they're not twins. No. They seem similar and just watching these guys hang out. We had to get our COVID test, right? And I'm in there like just choking and tearing. I was like, did he do that? And he's like, yeah. I was like, I don't believe you. There's no way. But no, man, it's a very heady feel. Like it's, from my standpoint, let's say from my context, I look at it like you do. Biden and Putin are having a meeting. This is historic, right? Even if nothing happens, it's still historic. The presidents are meeting. And there is a chance, since Biden is the one who called for this meeting, that he called for the meeting with the idea of getting something out of it, whatever that something is. I know the American media are ridiculous in the way that they talk about it. I mean, if you look at like the Washington Post and some of those things, it's like Biden is going to tell Putin what to do for 6 hours, and Putin is just going to stand there and watch. And it's like, that's nonsense, right? Nobody in their right mind is going to believe that these two are going to get in a room and Biden is just going to start screaming at him for 6 hours. Biden can't even stand up for 20 minutes, let alone scream at somebody for 6 hours. What's more likely to be true is that both of these guys, being in the position that they're in, know the reality of things that go beyond what the media talks about. And I would wager that they're not going to sit in there and waste their time talking about the nonsense that media talks about. They're going to get to the reality of governance and how can we come up with some kind of rules-based system where we don't end up at war.
You damn well sure hope so. I guess, and my assumption here is that Putin will be a bit more likely, but we'll see what happens. Putin will be a bit more likely to treat things that way. I think that Biden, for a variety of reasons, is responding directly to a lot of expectations that are being placed intentionally on him to try to get him to act in certain ways by the media here in the States. And so they're trying to shoehorn his behavior into a certain corner. And that's intentional, is, the claim that I'm making. They wanted him to be harsh on Putin.
But let's be very clear, though. Democrats did that. They did that. I mean, they spent 4 years screaming about Trump and Russia, and that Russia was, everything but a child of God.
And more than,
now
in
you're
some
trying to
cases,
pivot on
more
a
than
dime.
that.
How do you pivot on a dime?
No, you can't. You can't pivot on a dime. And I see you talked about the Washington Post. I saw on the CNN this morning a little bit more optimistically or less hawkishly or something, talking about how Biden going into this, trying to set up lines of communication, which, to be clear, we do not have officially with Moscow right now, the United States, I mean, of course, trying to set up lines of communication with Putin as a shrewd, wily man, as relations continue to deteriorate. But just a quick reminder here: this meeting, if it goes decently well, if you have communications resuming, that's a big deal. You're always going to have some communication, but there are lines of communication, and then there are lines of communication, and the diplomatic cords have been cut between the two countries.
Even if you have a situation where they get in and say, okay, we don't like each other, we're not going to get along, but here's a rules-based system, even within the context of us not liking each other, that we can operate on, as opposed to falling or ending up stupidly, accidentally into a war, that's still a win. The thing is, though, because of the domestic politics in the United States, you may never be able to get Biden to come out and say what happened in the meeting. Meaning Biden could go into the meeting and say, all right, we've said a lot of things about each other. We said a lot of lies, mostly for me. So let's just, let's get to brass tacks. There's no precedent there that's watching these guys talk. These guys are just talking as world leaders.
Yeah.
And there's a reality that goes about world leading that goes beyond what we, or for the matter, what the press sees. And honestly, the press on some level gets manipulated because of that. Some of that is, of course, where they don't ask the questions. Like if you're in American media, you don't ask, hey, you guys were trying to pull out you're trying to get back to the JCPOA, so was pulling out a mistake. Well, you can't ask that question. You can infer that, and you can even push and say, hey, what are you going to do if Iran doesn't come back into compliance? Mind you, the U.S. pulled out, but that's the way the U.S. media talks. It's very strange. And so Biden calls for this meeting, but the U.S. media says, well, Biden is going to read him the Riot Act. Well, yeah, but Biden called for the meeting because things were getting out of control in Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly.
He knows, regardless of what he says, regardless of what Biden says, he knows Russia is serious about that. It's, you're screwing with our borders, right? This is something that we're not going to tolerate. He gets, regardless of what he says, that is serious. He gets the problem associated with it. He gets Ukraine was being bellicose, and yet he's not going to say it. But it doesn't matter on some level what he says. It matters what he believes and what he knows. And when he goes into the room, it's what he knows. And that's not the propaganda and nonsense. That's these two guys talking. When they get out of the room, now you're back to propaganda.
That's what you hope.
I told him this. I told him that.
But remember, this is an event that we've heard about when Biden went to Putin back in the day, almost a decade ago at this point, and basically told him, hey, you shouldn't run for president again. Get out of the running effectively.
Yeah.
Now he was, of course, operating.
Let's place that though. Wait. I don't think the audience knows that story. We need to place that.
Yeah.
Like Biden gets in office, Obama gets in office, and Biden gets in office. Biden is sent by Obama or whoever to tell Russia that Putin shouldn't run for office again. Now, you're looking at here like, who the F are you? But just think for the moment of the framing of the world, like your workable point of view, to be able to go and tell another leader in a foreign country, foreign power, by the way, the second most nuclear weapons, hey, we don't think the guy should run. You guys are in the wrong world context. This is not Gorbachev. This is not Yeltsin. You're wrong context. Very wrong context. It's just, yeah, look. India is very chill about this because he doesn't think anything big is going to come of it. Okay, fair enough. And on some level, experience brings that level of cynicism. You and I talk, and I'm the ghost of Christmas past or ghost of Christmas future when I'm talking to you. By the same token, there's a level of hope in this. And that hope, to me, supersedes my cynicism in this moment.
I hear you, but I guess I'm cynical, though, because looking back at what happened, back then, it feels like I guess I'm just worried that Biden is going to go into this with the attitude of a principal calling a schoolboy to task, telling him, here's what you did wrong, here's what you need to do, and this is the punishment you'll receive. That attitude, not those words, of course, or even none of the specifics, but that attitude. Because it seems like that's effectively what he saw himself doing. That was his role. an agent of the principal or something being sent by Obama overseas, when he told Putin not to run back then, and all of the cautioning, all of the back down, all of the lines in the sand and red lines that we've drawn, it's all, even though we don't have a right to draw them, arguably, the whole attitude. You get my point, Jamarl.
Yeah, I get your point. It's a viceroy stuff. It's like it's our job to run the world, and we're going to tell you what to do, et cetera, et cetera. And when you don't, we're going to sanctions, and we're going to turn our media on you and everything else. I mean, I understand that for the domestic politics, that Biden did that stuff, fair enough, and Obama did that stuff, and Democrats did that stuff. By the same token, there is a reality of events that go beyond the nonsense that media typically talks about. And the reality of events is war. It's people dying. It's large-scale conflict that you can't extricate yourself from. And whatever I think of Biden, and whatever I think of this viceroy nonsense that I think he has in his head, what I am hoping like nobody's business, is that he gets, okay, I can't tell him what to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I'm going in a negotiation as two world leaders of thing where I recognize that his sphere of influence, and he recognizes my sphere of influence. And even though we're going to screw around with one another, at the very least, there's a rule set that we deal with on an overt level. If it's that's good. If it's Biden, just basically, I'm God King Biden, and you're supposed to listen to me when we tell you what to do, then no, that's nonsense. I mean, it's going to go nowhere.
Yeah.
It's going to go nowhere. RT is reporting that, I think RT and Sputnik, their reporting on this is more sane. They're basically saying, yeah, they're going to meet, and they're going to talk. There are all of these things on the table. Everything is on the table to negotiate and to discuss, period. Full stop. That's good. Everything is on the table. Now, they're going to be red lines, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that there is some, from my point of view, what I would consider this to be a success. If they get into the room and they recognize, all right, here are the things we need to discuss, and this is a rule set that we can work with, even if we don't entirely agree. Even if we don't agree, because we're not going to entirely agree.
Yeah.
But at the very least, on some level, there's some basis of reality that we can both agree upon and build upon. If it's that, and that's like an increment higher than where we are now. In fact, I would argue that's a hell of a lot higher than we are now. That's a positive. That's a win. That's a benefit. I would wish it goes further than that. I wish these guys come out here hugging each other and everything else, but I know that the reality of the domestic politics in the United States, and honestly, this point of view of world, of ruler of the world stuff, that we can't have any other country getting to be the Soviet Union in regards to strength and size. And when you think about what that means, so wait, you're going to try to mitigate every other country around the world from getting to a point of being larger? Like what, why? What right do you have to do that? Who gave you that capability? And is it somewhat self-serving that you're saying, well, we're going to maintain God King status and prevent any other country from gaining God King status? It's very, very self-serving and everything else.
That's the effect of the rhetoric. War. That's the effect of the rhetoric. But the way that we justify it is that we combat authoritarianism. Now, what immediately undoes that for me?
Terrorism is the other thing.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And what immediately undoes that for me is when you look at we were talking about it recently, the polling, the annual polling that goes on, where they look at internationally the view of nations and how democratic they are. What are the biggest threats to democracy? Which countries? And we were talking about this, Jamarl, and you know where I'm going with this, which is the United States was seen as the largest threat to democracy internationally. So wait, we present ourselves as pushing forward democracy over, and against authoritarianism. And this was a poll, by the way. This was not like an RT poll or like a CGTN poll or whatever. This isn't a poll from the quote-unquote adversaries. This is just a poll of people around the world. They view the United States as a chief threat to democracy. And that has been consistent. This is not merely residue coming from Donald Trump, where people residually feel that he was the cause for this stuff. No, this has been a consistent through line. Yet that's still the rhetoric we use. And I would be very interested to see if there were a not just a nominally democratic nation, but a genuinely democratic nation, which I would frankly consider Russia. Although, they have their problems and I don't want to dismiss them, but what would we do if Germany suddenly started to explode, if they became not just the economic juggernaut of Europe, but the economic juggernaut of the world, and intense industrial production? And you get my point. How would we handle that? Would we, because we would have to come up with a justification for keeping him down, is my guess.
Well, it depends on whether they're continue to be a vassal state, or whether they contain, did in the process of that economic output, are they increasing their military output? Is there economic output taken away from some of the jobs and businesses in the United States? Like, it's that. Like, it's not just, okay, they're getting big. It's what it means. Like, when you become an economic juggernaut, what does it mean? That's soft power.
Yeah.
That's jobs that you're taking away from other countries, and that type of stuff. It gets there where it's geopolitical, economic, all that stuff kind of worked into one.
Absolutely.
The thing with this, though, is I feel that this is more geopolitical. And I swear, man, there is this weird paternal thing in this country that is in our heads every bit as much as it was in Britain's. And we don't see it. It's this, like, the white man's burden, like what Britain talk about, oh, we have to lift up the world, and it's such a burden to rule the world. And it's like, those tribes that you were killing and everything else didn't want you there. They were perfectly content with you not being there. This is some stuff that you put on. We have it too, as Americans. Like, in the way that we look at stuff, it's like, hey, should we kill Soleimani? Yeah, 50%. Okay. They don't even know who the guy is. They still say, yeah, whack him. That's fine. How do you do that? How do you get to that mindset, right? You're making, $18,000 a year, and you're like, yeah, whack that guy. Totally. Know nothing about the international order, and yet feel totally confident that you can make those choices. I guess my point in this is there's something that needs, on some level, to change. And regardless of what's in the head of Americans and what's in the head of media and what media is howling about for their next headlines and everything else, I honest to God hope that there is enough of Biden, still in Biden, to have good sense to not act that way. And unfortunately, I don't know that to be true.
I hear you.
So we'll see. I mean, Mindy's skepticism may be just. By the same token, Biden did call the meeting. And, I would hope that he didn't have this comically ridiculous point of view that he's going to call the meeting and browbeat Vladimir Putin for 6 hours. If that's the case, then this was a waste. This was stupid. He should have never did it.
I hear you.
If it's, let's come up with a rules-based system of organizing and operating, then yes, that's a win, and that's something that could be done.
It'd probably be somewhere in between.
Whether these guys come out hugging or not, yeah, right. Whether they come out hugging or not, what I'm hoping is behind the scenes there's an honest recognition of, this kind of sovereign zones, sovereign spaces, and even if it's not entirely agreement, it's at the very least this kind of rule set of disagreement. There was a level of respect that went along during the Soviet Union that just doesn't seem to be around now, despite the fact that these countries were at odds, nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And maybe an argument can be made that the respect was there because they were at odds with nuclear weapons, if that makes sense.
Maybe, but we're still there. We are still at odds with nuclear weapons is the big thing that I hear there. It's just that we've sort of forgotten about it or something. Jamarl, I think I'm going to take us into a break here, and we're going to let you go for now. And we're going to be playing, for those listening, a pre-record that you did yesterday, Jamarl did yesterday with Lee Camp. So you will still be with us in presence, if not technically. But anyway, you guys will be hearing what we're going to be talking about. Lee Camp, Jamarl Thomas, having a conversation here. We're going into a break, and we will get back into that. This is the Young Turks going after Aaron Mate and the whiplash they've experienced as they've gotten widespread pushback from their audience and many former members of their audience. Anyway, I'm sure many of the folks in the audience are familiar with exactly what happened here. Jamarl will be getting into it with Mr. Lee Camp, host of Redacted Tonight over on RT, on the other side of this short break. We'll be right back.